guys. Okay, so the one thing I get asked probably the most, especially after I place a video up with show results and things like that, is for showing tips. Normally I'm getting a lot of questions about documentation and organization, but I've thrown a couple other things into this video. I'm not the best informational person unless I'm being asked direct questions, because when there's so much information to give, it's really hard to cram it all into a YouTube video that won't take me, 2 days to upload. So there's still a lot more. What I would like to say is showing is a lot of trial and error. It can take a few shows for you to find like a system that works really well for you and things like that. So, I've just been showing for a long time and kind of learned what fits me best over time. So the first thing that I think is key to a successful show is organization. Now, everyone has their own way, and what my way is may not be the best way for you. I use an Excel sheet, and on that Excel sheet I will list all of the classes in order, and then I will list, in the blocks, in the cells beside that list, I will list all the horses that are going into that class and their name, and then I will list their placing next to that. It helps me because I can easily look and go, okay, Thoroughbred is up, what resins are in Thoroughbred, and I can record what place they get and then slap that in a file cabinet when I get home, and I have a record of all my shows and the placings in case I forget or something like that. It also helps because I don't really keep up with ribbons well. I know a lot of people print out the class list and just write the horse's name beside that. That doesn't work very well for me because it ends up looking really messy, but I know that works for a lot of people. My really big suggestion here is that whatever method you use to keep track of what horses you're showing and where they go is to make 2 copies, at least 2 copies. That way, in case you lose one or you need an extra or whatever, it's better to have a backup. Transportation. I have resins and customs, mostly just resins now, and I use homemade pony pouches that we make for my resins. As you can see, they have a soft fabric, or a non-sticky fabric in the inside. I don't know a lot about the fabric. My grandma does this, but it won't bleed, it won't stick unless they get ridiculously sticky. It's really smooth, so it doesn't scratch or rub or anything like that. We use a lot of batting to make these thick and fluffy. So I just put my resins in there, nothing on them, just slide them in the pouch, tie the pouch up, and they go in a tub. If I do not have a pouch, yes, I resort to bubble wrap. Now, you have to do what you feel is best here. If I'm going to use bubble wrap, of course you always do the non-bubble part towards the horse. Don't ever put the bubble part towards the horse. But if I'm going to use that bubble wrap, I'm going to put tissue paper around my horse. I am not a person who will put toilet paper on a horse. I know a lot of people do it. I will not. I use tissue paper, and really important key here, I don't just take a piece of tissue paper, like tissue paper that you would put in a present or something like that. I don't just take that piece of tissue paper and wrap my horse in it. I crumple up the tissue paper and I get it kind of in this worn down state so it's not so rough. So I don't just take fresh tissue paper out of the packet and put it on the horse. Like I said, I crumple it up, I get it a little roughed up because I feel that takes away that texture that would rub your horse. I have never had tissue paper give my resins a flaw. So I use that. Sometimes if it's like a horse that I don't have to worry about getting sticky, like one of my pasteled pieces, I will just use bubble wrap and just make sure to have the non-bubble side going against. But I usually always at least put a piece of tissue paper in there just to keep that plastic away. I would not leave my resins in my pouches too long. Not because I don't have any faith in my pouches or anything, but I would not want to be the one to test how breathable those pouches are for a very long period of time. And I'm not talking like going to a show 2-3 days. I'm talking like weeks. So that's just something to keep about. Transporting, it's really going to be what best method for you, what you have. I don't use t-shirts or anything, but I know a lot of people use those for OF. I can't help you OF people. I'm so sorry, but I just don't do it. So for documentation, this is probably what I get asked the most questions about, and probably the biggest tips I can give you for showing. I think documentation is important, and I'm probably one of those people who uses more documentation than sometimes needs, and I'm okay with that. Things to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out if you should document are color. Is the color odd? Is it one of the less commonly known colors that runs in the breed? Is this a weird color that is like some sort of mutation? Pattern. Is your pattern weird? I mean, is there something about your pattern that a judge is going to be like, is that real? Breed. Breed is a big one. You don't necessarily need to document every single breed. Some breeds are just known. Other breeds are really not known. They're good to document. And a combo of all that stuff above. How I like to think about documentation, and this is the best way I can explain it for you, is documentation is your chance to defend your line of thought for that model. Why did you pick this breed? Why did you pick this color? Why this pattern? Why does it fit? Why does it work? You cannot explain these things to the judges. It's not like you can walk up there and be like, let me tell you a little bit about this horse and why it's this and how this is real. Documentation is your way to speak with that judge while following the rules. It's your way to help them see the train of thought that you had when you created a piece or when you picked a breed. That's the importance of documentation. So I have a few examples here I'm going to show you. So for instance, for pattern, my Nova here, as you can see, my Nova is a bit crazy, mostly in this face area right here. I even had a few friends when I got him painted point out that, not that they didn't like him, just that that face marking was odd. But I mean, overall his pattern is pretty much, you know, common, Overo, but it's just a little weird, and that face marking is just like, wow, that's, you know, some people could think that's odd. So to go ahead and make sure that a judge doesn't feel that way at a show or question it, I printed out these references for him, which are the horse we used to base him on. And you can see that that horse has that weird face marking. So I didn't put any information about the breed because, well, I'm not trying to document the breed here. The breed was pretty straightforward. What I'm trying to document is the pattern. So you can see I put that it's a pattern reference and 2 pictures of the pattern, especially focusing on that facial marking. That's one really good tactic to use when you're documenting patterns, because I especially think with some of the more crazy patterns like, you know, your Overos, and when you're gonna get into your like really crazy one-of-a-kind Appaloosa patterns, it's important to document that because you want your judge to know that you were basing this off a real horse and you didn't just make it up. Right here, my imp. My imp is another really great example of documenting a pattern type. As you can see, my imp, and my camera's not focusing for some reason, my imp is a Tobiano with 1 solid leg. Now, a lot of judges are not, well, I won't say a lot of judges. There are a handful of people who aren't aware Tobianos can have a solid leg, and they can. It's more rare. Now, when you see my documentation, you're probably be like, wow, why didn't you explain how it happens? When I was reading about why people think certain Tobianos come out with 1 solid leg instead of having 4 white legs, it was really complicating, and honestly, I didn't even totally understand it. I just read that it was possible, but it was rare, or not rare, but it was much less common. I felt like that information would be overwhelming on the table and that it wasn't needed. All I needed were photos. It wasn't a big explanation needed. So as you can see here, I'm just letting them know what I'm documenting, a Tobiano with a solid leg, and then I included photos of Tobiano horses with solid legs. That's all I did. And then it documents that pattern so that judge doesn't have to go, man, I don't know, can Tobianos have a solid leg? There are some photos for you. Pixie here is a great example of where I document breed, color, and pattern. What I show Pixie as, sometimes people could wonder if that breed comes in that color, if the breed comes in that pattern. Sometimes people don't. But my documentation helps me show a judge why I picked it and that it is there in case they aren't aware. Or just gives them more information. So as you can see in Pixie's documentation, I put the reference photo of the color and pattern together on one horse. I used another reference photo that I thought represented her conformation and stuff pretty well, and a final reference photo that I felt wasn't too far off from her conformation, but again, it shows that Champagne and Tobiano gene running through the breed. This is a really good, and I did put a blurb about the breed there. This is a really good way to, show your train of thought everywhere. I have the pattern in color, I have the color again showing that it shows up and it's not a complete rarity, and confirmation. Another thing that I really take a lot of time with my documentation is finding photos of horses that represent my model well, and I try to find something that's really similar in pose or doing the same type of action. If the horse is standing, I try to find more standing photos. If the horse is running, I try to find more running. I try to keep my photos as close to the model as possible for breed references. Obviously, if my color references, that can be a bit different, but for my breed references, I do try to keep them in the same pose as the horse. For example, on that one I can show you is my Affinity. She doesn't really need documentation, but I found some horses that were similar in pose, so I put them on a piece of paper. And as you can see, I did all those photos. I kind of tried to stay within the same motion. It's not always exact, but it's close. That's a really big tip I can give you because I think it gives the judge a good comparison. Another big tip for photos is making sure that the photo of the breed you are using represents the breed well. You don't want to just use any other picture that you found on Google. You don't want to use the person that popped up. If you're going on Google, make sure you find out if that horse is really the breed you think it is, and make sure it is a good representation of the breed. What I mean by that is, sometimes there are photos that come up on Google, but that horse, has another breed crossed into it, so it might not be the best representation. Is it in a healthy state that matches your horse? Asking yourself questions like that. But again, I think one of the biggest tips I can give you that really makes your documentation stand out is finding pictures that are really similar to the horse you're showing. My final big tip for showing is don't always follow everybody else. I know we tend to try and pick the breeds that we know the horse does well as already because it's easier and that can, make finding a breed easier. But my biggest suggestion to you is take your time to do your breed research. What breed can you show that horse as that makes it different? What breed are people going to look at and be like, really? That breed? And want to look at your documentation and see, well, why did they choose that breed? I'm not saying to just place a horse in a class because, you don't know what's a different breed to do and just try it. I mean, if you can do research and find a different breed that horse can go as, then do it. Don't just say, oh, well, it's always commonly shown as X, so I'm going to do X. Dig deep. I have a conga line of LC resins, so I've had to really dig to think up some breeds for her so that they all don't have to go in the same class. Like, I've really had to sit down and go over hundreds of pony breeds and be like, well, why wouldn't this one work? Or why could this one work? And what about LC doesn't fit this? I don't just go with what I know she can do well as, like what she was sculpted as. You know, you have to be able to sit there and walk yourself through the steps of finding a breed that's going to make it stand out. The other tip I have is not getting frustrated with yourself if your horse doesn't place. It's important if you're upset about a horse not placing that you ask the judge why it didn't place, because maybe it is your breed, but maybe it was just personal preference. Just because your horse doesn't place doesn't mean you need to change your breed. Sometimes people end up doing really badly with a horse because they show it for the first time as a breed, it doesn't place, the breed was perfect, but they changed the breed because it didn't place, but they didn't ask the judge what it was, and sometimes that can be your biggest mistake. And don't forget, each judge is different. I can show Nova under one judge and he'll nan. I can show Nova under another judge and he'll do nothing. So, I mean, you can't automatically assume it's your breed and your breed choice. Now, sometimes it is that problem, but that is the importance of asking a judge, hey, why didn't you place him? Could you explain to me? And sometimes they're going to say, well, the breed didn't work, here's XXX. If your judge can give you really good information like that, you should seriously consider it and maybe relook your breed. But if your judge just says, it was personal preference, I liked horse X and X more, sometimes they'll go into reasons. I've had a judge tell me before, well, I liked that so-and-so had a shorter mane, I don't really like long flowing manes, things like that. You know, sometimes they'll give you reasons and you can go, okay, so it wasn't the breed. And it's like, no, it's not the breed, it was just a personal preference, I didn't like the piece itself. You know, sometimes it's, you know, it can be a plethora of things, but don't always change your breed just because it doesn't place. Now, I will say that sometimes it's nice to try a different breed after several times the horse doesn't place and you are getting constant feedback that it's the breed. So I hope these tips help. This has turned into a long video, and that's why I'm saying I didn't have a lot of, I didn't even cover that much here. Or go into that much depth, and it's already taken so much time. So that's why it's really hard. But documentation, I feel, can really help you do really well at shows. Take the proper time to work on them, and, you know, don't rush to make them, and don't make them false. Don't throw pictures on there that aren't that breed. Don't throw information in there that you make up. Don't leave information out because it hurts you. You have to be truthful with your documentation. I know a lot of these comments were geared towards custom and original finish, but I mean custom and artist resin, but I feel that they can still be applied in most contexts to original finish. I'm sorry I don't speak in terms of original finish because I know a lot of you do have those, but really, you can work these the same way because you can still look for pictures in the poses of briars, you can still look for pictures with the same colors and patterns, and you can still do all of that. So when you watch this video, you know, you don't have to be like, oh, this only applies to artist resin and customs. No, you can take this information and apply it as well. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'm reading your tips every time you send them in about videos you'd like to see, things you'd like me to help you with, and I'm working on them. I promise I really am. But as you see, I do struggle with trying to condense all this information I want to share into a video that this will probably still take a few hours to upload. So I'm really trying, and I'm working on a few more for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Again, bye.